Hello there and welcome to a special celebration of summer. This isn't to replace Gardeners World Live, which would normally be happening at the NEC. You've got to put your date in the diary for next year and come along and join us. But this special celebration is brought directly to your home so that you still keep in contact with us and you can still see all your friends and your familiar faces that you know and love from the Gardeners World show. We've got a whole range of different special events going on the website, gardenersworldlive.com, plus lots of activity going on social media. You can review Monty's interview from yesterday with Lucy Hall. You can replay this interview that I'm going to be doing with Adam Frost very shortly. Plus, you can see all the Gardeners World viewers' videos that they've sent in, little glimpses into their own gardens. And there's a whole host of different resources that will help you buy plants and sundries for your garden to make this your best gardening year ever. So, without any more ado, let's introduce my special guest for this afternoon, Mr. Adam Frost. So Adam, it's really nice to see you. I haven't seen you for months.
And you. Look at me hair, mate. I'm thinking sort of 70s rock star. What do you reckon?
It's good. Have you seen the repair shop?
Yeah, I really enjoy that.
You're looking like Dom, the guy in the repair shop. He's got that sort of rockabilly look. It's good.
Yeah, there you go. So, Mrs. Frost was trying to do something with it this morning, but yeah. So how are you, mate?
I'm okay. It feels a bit odd being in isolation, doesn't it? It feels a bit peculiar that we're not going through the year as we normally do, bumping into each other at shows and working together. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, I think I think that was part of. And obviously, I was meant to go to Chelsea to build a garden, wasn't I? And I think it was at that point that it dawned on me that I wasn't going to bump into everybody that you normally. And you realise that actually, there's not that many of us that do, like the shows like Gardeners World, and we use it as an annual catch-up, don't we?
We're a tight little team, and if we don't see one another, we always think that there's something wrong, and we've not seen any of our friends, have we, really, apart from remotely like this, of course. But and also missing out on seeing the public, because, they're my friends as well. There's so many I've seen over the years, and you bump into people again and again, and it does feel a little bit isolated. Anyway, that was isolation. We're now allowed to go. You're even allowed to go out now, aren't you?
But I think it's more permission from Mrs. Frost, mate, not from the government. She doesn't trust me to go out. But I think what has been lovely for me, actually, is doing the early Gardeners World programmes when Monty was in lockdown, and the fact that we're still getting messages about those programmes and doing the bits and pieces we are online. There's an appetite, mate. If there's one thing to come out of this for us gardeners is that I think we're going to have a whole new group of friends. And that's my one prayer, that outside of this, there's a lot more people that have got their hands in the soil.
And people have been sowing seeds as well, which I think is the best thing of all, because they've been growing stuff from the tiny little seeds and nurturing it rather than going out and buying plants instant. It's that whole gardening thing that we love, nurturing stuff. So what's happening in the garden then? Tell me what's happening in the garden.
Well, as you can imagine, like a lot of people, mate, the garden's never had so much attention. I'm normally, I'm in and out from March.
Has that been finished?
No, it's not finished. No, that's about another 15 years. But I've enjoyed I feel incredibly, privileged, slightly embarrassed that we've got the garden, if that makes any sense. But that's one of the reasons we've been trying to share it online. But I've really just enjoyed the detail, if that makes sense. Just the time, instead of rushing to this job, to that job, to the next job, sitting a bit, and watching the bees, listening to the birds.
And you're a very busy man. I know that because I try and get in contact with you from time to time, and then it's about 3 weeks until you get back in. I'm joking. But you are a busy man, so that is a real pleasure, isn't it? To sit down and, as you say, listen to the birds, watch the bees. You know,
Yeah.
drink a gin. I've seen you on At Home with the Frosts.
That's been really good. It's been, to be fair, that was, Amber Lily. So Amber Lily's what, the 15-year-old, and Lil said we kept getting all these questions, all right. So, and I go, I can't answer all these questions by emails. I've got a job to do. And she said, well, why don't we do a live thing? I said, what? Anyway, then she explained to me what it was, and I go, well, how do we do it then? And then Lena and, Mrs. Frost and I had a conversation, and the next thing, we're out there, and then all of a sudden the gym class arrives and the questions, and actually it's been mind-blowing how many people have engaged with it. But mate, we've been sent, because we always finish, with a clink and a gin or a bottle of beer, we've been sent beer through the post. We've been sent bowls of gin, and people just saying, please keep going.
It's so good, isn't it? That whole connection. We've all learnt new technology. It's amazing, and we've all become remotely connected. And I guess that's a brilliant thing for going forward, isn't it? Particularly for grandparents and grandkids and children and friends and everything. We've all learnt to keep in contact more remotely. So I think it's great.
I think as well. I'm not going back to my old life.
No.
So
you're going to be in that room all the time, are you?
Yeah, I think I am. That in the garden. I think, do you know what? The amount of travelling I do, and I realise I could do it, a lot of it, just like this.
Well, that's something that I think we should talk about a little bit later, because we're going to be talking about climate change and also how this has affected our view of climate change, I think, really. But tell me what your favourite plants in the garden at the moment. Let me tell you what's going on in mine.
Go on.
I've got roses galore. Isn't it a year for roses?
Wow. Until the last few days, they're looking a little bit like, ooh, what happened? But what? Unbelievable.
Amazing. Do you know, I've got Rosa chinensis mutabilis, which is a China rose. It's one of the really old species roses. And it's great because it sort of changes colour from sort of apricot to pink as it ages. It's one of those that dies gracefully. And but it's been in flower since about March. And it's just going on and on and on. And it's such a good rose year. What about yours?
Yeah.
What roses?
I mean, obviously Gertrude, one of my favourites. Gertrude's doing her business, so. But Mustard Wood, Mustard Wood sits next to it in the herbaceous border, and again, just being amazing. But even having the time, fella, just to stop and go, just that
classic quote. Smell the roses, take time to smell the roses. But the thing is, if you're like me, this time of year is so busy, you normally go away and the roses are perhaps tiny little buds, and then you come back and all the petals have gone, they've even decomposed on the ground.
Exactly. And, and Mrs. Frost and the kids tell me the roses were lovely.
Perhaps that's a difference. Perhaps it's just that we're seeing them. Perhaps it's not a very good rose year at all, but we're just actually seeing.
I don't know. I think that good dry, we had that dry spell, mate, didn't we? We had a wet winter, then do that dryness, and I think that just gave them so much to kick them on. And I think I'm getting more into my species roses as well. So I've interplanted a lot of those.
Yeah, you love species roses, don't you? I've seen you change over the last couple of years, got more and more of them.
Yeah, and I think it's the hips, but it's also the foliage, and so I've really enjoyed those. And actually, the one that's looking good outside the front of the house that flowered really well, and then the hips are coming now, is Doncasterii, which doesn't sound the most romantic name in the world, but
you can say it though. That's good because but it's name, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've got, I'm a big fan of Alba roses as well, which are the ones that have got the bluish green leaves. And they only produce one big flush of flowers, really. But the one out at the moment, Great Maiden's Blush.
Yeah.
Do you know what? It describes it so perfectly because it's just flushed with pink. It's an absolute delight. And it's quite a big shrub now, and it's sort of bobbing around in the breeze. It's just delightful. And that goes on to produce some nice hips as well. So,
and I'll tell you last thing on that, my rope arches, because you've helped prune them. Well, we've been teaching, haven't you? They're looking awesome. Yeah. They're just really filled out, and there's just a lovely sort of swag of movement and scent and, flower, but they're all quite pale colours, so they're soft pinks and they're whites, and there's just a beautiful highlight that just dragging your eye all the way down the garden. Yeah.
The thing I love about that rope swag as well is, as you say, it drags your eye down the garden, but it doesn't look too grand.
No.
It looks country gardeny, it's not trying to be too clever. It's absolutely lovely. I really like
it's
that.
not too
So
heavy.
tell me, I've also got lots of really good perennials in flower. I mean, they seem to be doing really well at the moment. So I've got astrantias. I just love astrantias.
Yeah.
I think you do too. And I've got one that Carol Klein gave me a division of years ago, called Roma, which is a pink one.
Lovely.
And it flowers and flowers its socks off. And if you cut it back, they have a habit of then producing a second flush of flowers later on, haven't they? But you've got a lot of astrantias too.
Yeah, and I've got to tell you what's really been performing well. Just the front of the little woodland area is Star of Billion.
I don't know that one.
Star of Billion. So a sort of a white flower really, a sort of off-white, but it sits there, it gets the early morning sun. And as the sun moves over that area during the day, it literally changes with the light, and it's interesting, that area. It's been a really strange area because it was east facing, and I think it must get really good early light, if that makes sense, So much of the stuff was starting to go in that direction, even though it was stuff that you pick the books up and it tells you happy in semi-shade, it was still all going towards that light.
Yeah.
But the astrantia, the Star of Billion, is one of them that's just stayed completely bolt upright. And I love what I love about them is not just that flower, or it's the longevity of, they just keep on going,
I guess it's because they're not really petals, are they? They're like bracts on the outside, aren't they? And they just seem to stay for so long. And that light that you're talking about, when you get the light glancing across the top of them early in the morning or last thing at night, they sparkle, don't they?
And I think maybe because some of them are more or less sort of translucent, aren't they? And you more or less feel like they're sort of sucking, the light's going, it's sort of going through them, and incredible plants, really are.
The white varieties, I think some of the dark ones seem to absorb light, don't they? And you can sometimes lose those lovely dark ones, particularly if they're in semi-shade, and they may as well not be there. But the white ones and the pink ones really shine out and say, "Look at me, I'm lovely."
Yeah, they do, and again, good foliage. So even when they're not flowering, they're a good foliage plant to work other plants off. So they're one of those sort of hard-working plants, aren't they?
Yeah. And I tell you another thing, herbaceous-wise, I've never, ever seen the arum lilies flower as well as this year. That must again be that warmth early on in the year. But Xanthidestia ethiopica, there's a name to get.
There you go, boy. I knew you'd get one out in a minute.
But the white arums, my goodness, I have never known so many flowers on them. They're just flowering and flowering and flowering. And I've got a little tropical area, as you can see out the back here. And they're in a little pond out there, and it's just, or not in the pond, but on the edge of the pond. And they just look fantastic. Really, really nice. You've got a lot of watery areas as well, haven't you, in the garden?
Yeah, I have got watery areas, but actually a couple of that are growing, that I've played with this year, something called Disporum, which is part of the Solomon Seal family, and actually it looks slightly more elegant than Solomon Seal. And then the little bell flowers, sort of, instead of hanging singly, they sit in clusters. So that's been really good. And I treated myself. I've got a nursery down the road, and when we've had a little bit of sort of release from lockdown, Abs, so the oldest, came with me over to the nursery to pick some stuff up, and Colin, the fella over there, said, come and have a look at this. And what caught Abby's eye was podophylium, and spotty dotty, which is a little bit out there, but she loved it. So I've put some of that in this year, and that's another plant, isn't it? Big, blousy foliage, a little bit of a showstopper. So
they've got a bit of a reputation as being difficult to grow.
Yeah.
And yet they're actually quite tough, aren't they?
Yeah, they are quite tough. I think, I've put them into that woodland area. I've put a decent amount of organic matter in there over the years anyway. I've picked an area that won't dry. you know, so it's got good deep soil there. And they've been in what, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. They've already, you can tell they've got their feet in and they're giving it, you know, their heads are up and they're, oh, I like this.
And they'll love this rain, won't they? They'll be sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, this is where we want to be. We want to live here. You're right, though. That's the key with so many plants, isn't it? Get that soil improved and give them a good start. And try not to plant too much in midsummer. I know that we're both guilty of it. But yeah, try and plant in the spring or something. But they will romp away, won't they?
Yeah,
I missed it. Sorry, carry on. No.
I was going to say, if you are planting, you know, this time of year, actually putting some organic matter in the hole and making sure you're really soaking the plants, you know, so you're giving them a good chance, really. You know, because I'm like you, I still go off to the nursery and come home with stuff. And
so have you still got that huge plant holding area where you bought stuff and it's ready to go in?
You're being blessed with me. I've got some of it in. So I have, you know, I've had real weekends in the garden, you know, so I've got some in.
A few left to plant actually. And now it's rained. It's fantastic now. So because we've had about 10 weeks with no rain here in Dorset, can you believe? We're almost East Anglian. It's been so weird.
I mean, it's been bizarre, isn't it? Because we, you know, during the winter, I've said to you before, you know, that bottom end of that garden was underwater. Well,
I saw it. I came to see you, didn't I, last autumn? And there was about a foot of standing water at one time, wasn't there? Amazing.
But the interesting thing about that, and then obviously we've had the real dry. The bit that's blown me away is what's performed well in it. You know, I had my peonies, mate, right, coming out of the water. They look like bubble. They were growing out of the water. And this year they've gone on and been brilliant.
And then they've survived with precious little water, you know, coming from above. They've probably got such a volume of water in the soil that it's amazing, isn't it, really? Nature is adaptable. But I think we're seeing more and more of those climate extremes, aren't we? That's the point. I don't remember it, you know, certainly in the last 20 years. It seems that every year is the hottest year, the wettest year, the windiest year. But to go from being so waterlogged over winter to then having that period where no rain at all.
You know, and we're both of this. I know we're both off the same song sheet here. You know, for me, what normally kills plants is cold, wet, not necessarily cold, but it's, you know. So I was worried to death about the things that were going to suffer. Even the cardoons. The cardoons have loved it. They've gone wild. You know, and
that's weird because you think that they're a drought-tolerant plant.
Exactly.
And they want dry soil.
Yeah, and so I suppose that's the whole thing, isn't it? As a gardener, we're on this journey, you know, and you know, and that's why I think I've got to the point that books are good as a guide, but I think that's all a book ever is, really, is someone's opinion. It's a guide, and you've got to find your own way and understand your own garden, and I do love the way that nature surprises us.
Yeah, but your own garden, your own soil, and your own little microclimate, because, you know, you are sort of East Anglia and I'm sort of broadly southwest, and we garden differently, don't we, because of what a climate is in locally. Well,
and now we're you know, clay on a limestone bed, and you've got lime and acid in your garden, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a very small garden, well, smallish. It's 100 foot long, and in 100 feet, the bit near the house is pH 7.58. It's really, really limey. And then there's a little patch at the end of the garden that's about 4.5. And how does that happen? But anyway, it's just different geology that runs through the end of my garden. So, and I think that we've just, as gardeners, we've got to learn our gardening skills, haven't we? If you're going to garden in the face of all this change and seeing the wettest year, the driest year, the windiest year, the whatever, we've got to really brush up on our proper gardening skills. Like you were saying earlier about improving the soil.
To me, that goes back to an old Jeff Hamilton thing. The answer's in the soil, boy. The answer's in the soil, and that's exactly where it is, isn't it? If you put, I think a lot of the time, we either worry about the expense of what we're going to put in the soil because it seems sometimes expensive for what we're going to get out of it. But then also it can feel like hard work. But, it always amazes me that we don't all give our soil the best treatment we can, ultimately. So even if it's every third year or whatever it is, but that goodness you put into that soil, it repays you, doesn't it?
It does. And I think a lot of people only start to improve their soil if they've got problems.
Yeah.
So if they've got very heavy soil or a very light soil, they think, I must improve my soil. But the ones that have got perhaps a half decent soil, they're a bit complacent about it. And you can't be complacent about soil, even if you've got what you think is a really good soil. Keep bunging the muck on, keep bunging the organic matter on, unless you're growing drought-tolerant plants that don't need too much moisture. But I heard a thing last year. It was about the number of harvests that we've got left in our soils. And they were saying that we've only got something like 100 harvests left in our temperate soils, which means that we're not putting enough, with the exception of organic farming, obviously, but we're not putting enough back into the soil. And as gardeners, we've got to do that as well.
We have. We can't take that for granted. But again, you think about it. You roll back, and I talk to you about Jeff quite a bit because I think he sits there on my shoulder half the time. But if you think about organics, peat-free gardening, stop ripping up limestone pavements, 30 years ago, we still have the same conversation.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Well, I think it's scary too, because we've got to do something about it. And if the lockdown, this sort of change of life that we've seen, if that lockdown has taught us anything, it's taught us that we've got to adapt and we've got to change. And we've got to try and cut down on the number of car journeys we make and the number of plane journeys we take. And just look what's happened to the environment and nature. It's just bounced back, hasn't it? It's wonderful.
I think the most beautiful thing that I've seen, and it was reasonably early in our lockdown, was the bottom of the canal in Venice in a picture. And I went, wow. If that can happen in 4 or 5 weeks, that gives you this sense that maybe Mother Nature can heal things quicker than we necessarily think that she can. And if we can back off long enough to give her time, when you think about it logically, this is the first time Mother Nature's had a chance to breathe for about 250 years. And she's gone, right, she's having a holiday. And I think, I suppose I hope, the sort of the positive gardener in me really hopes that there is a realisation that this is the point. This is the point where we can change direction.
And I think as gardeners, though, perhaps we're hopefully not tarred with that brush, but generally gardeners think that they're a bit green anyway, don't they? And they think, I'm doing my bit for the environment. I don't need to do any more. And actually, even gardeners are having an effect on the environment, aren't they? By buying all these garden centre plants and not growing as much themselves, and I'm not trying to stop people going out and buying stuff from garden centres, but there's a lot of times when they could grow things from seed themselves. There's all sorts of things that you can do in your garden as well to be a bit greener. And I mean, I know that for years we've been talking about encouraging wildlife and, making hedgehog habitats and things like that. And that all gives us this superficial feeling that we're doing something for the environment. But I think that gardening and that the very act of how we design our gardens and how we garden is really important for the environment. And I've written a feature in this month's issue of Gardener's World. It's all about climate change. Have you got a copy?
I've got. Don't worry, mate. Do you know what?
Shall I send you this one?
It's up on the coffee table in.
I thought it was bedtime reading. There we are. I'm disappointed.
It's in the front room, but no, I was just pouring a cup of tea out of a teapot. Is what I was doing.
Yeah, cheers. But in there, it's talking about how climate is changing and how, as gardeners, we've got to try and do our bit to try and stop using the world's resources, but also adapt to this climate change, because it is changing dramatically. And in there, I've also got 10 things that you can do to try and help your garden. And one of the things that I think is really important, if you look out behind me, you can sort of see it in action, is this: rather than having a flat garden with bedding plants and just serried fences and a lawn, I try to create multi-layered planting so that you trap like your own little climate around plants in your garden. And I know you do that too, don't you?
I always talk, I mean, when I'm teaching, I always talk about viewing a garden as an English woodland, don't I? And, you know, looking at the layer system within a woodland and how that works, you know, within the fact that how that, you know, generates more plants itself, but how that deals with, you know, everything from heat and moisture, but also, you know, layers of interest throughout the year. So I mean, it's a great way to look at your garden as well and understand the bits that you feel you've got missing. If you just simply break it into layers, it's quite a fascinating way of, but
so like when you go into, I always liken it to when you go into a woodland. It doesn't matter whether you go into a woodland in the winter, it's a bit warmer than outside, isn't it? And when you go into a woodland in the summer, it's a bit cooler than outside. And it just balances the climate out. Yeah. And when you go out into a big open field in the winter, you think, oh, and when you go out into a big open field in the summer, you think, oh, it's swelteringly hot. So it balances. I just think makes sense, really. You know,
and I think it's that understanding of microclimate, understanding, you know, you get lots of questions like I do. Oh, you know, my so-and-so's done this year, or so-and-so's done this, or something's happened, and this is and we forget that, you know, I don't know, I think quite a lot, we had affected a few things in this garden. We had that cold snap just at the end of May. Things were going boom, 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 and then we had a couple of days, you know, probably 3 bad nights, and that chopped a few things, you know, and it's understanding what you said earlier on about those microclimates. If you understand those little spots in your garden where it's a little cooler, but also maybe it's a little warmer, and the moment you do that, you know, that again gives you that understanding, and that layer system starts to create those microclimates.
Well, I've got just out here, so I'm in North Dorset and I'm in a frost pocket, effectively. Yeah. Believe it or not, in Dorset. Can you believe it? But outside, because I've got established canopy of plants and I've got some chews and fan palms out there with evergreen foliage, initially the frost would drain into that area and it would kill things out there. Now, the canopy over the top, even the deciduous things sort of just filter out the worst of that cold air as it descends in the winter. And there's so many things I grow out there now that I didn't used to grow, because I've got this layer going on. Yeah. Another thing that I really believe in as well is I was never very good at physics at school. Okay, so I just didn't understand it really. But the one thing I did understand, which registered with me, was the specific heat capacity of water. Sounds a bit technical, but if you put a pan of water on the stove, you can hold your hand over the top of it for a long time, doesn't it? Because it takes ages for that water to warm up. Yeah. So water transmits heat, you know. So if you use that principle in your garden, you can do something else to keep off frost, which is put loads of ponds in your garden.
Exactly. And, you know, and that's a lovely balance.
Did that, didn't they?
And that's habitat as well. Yeah. You know, so the moment you're doing that, you're providing, we forget it's, you know, every single element of wildlife needs water, you know, and the moment you're doing that, you're doing it. I mean, I remember, and actually I did it on purpose. I can remember us teaching one day, and I always keep water in the greenhouse, don't I?
Yeah.
And I do that for that, you know, to keep that moisture content and whatever. Of course, I do it by habit.
Yeah.
It was an old boy in the Parks department, you know, and used to keep the tank topped up in there and would explain to me why. Of course, I hadn't even mentioned it, and you went, "Oh, Adam's done so-and-so there."
So brilliant, isn't it?
I think some things we probably take for granted because we've been doing it for so long. So things like your article are good, really, because I think there will be people doing that sort of stuff as well, but they don't necessarily understand the effect it's having on their garden.
Yeah, that's really kind of you. Thank you. But the greenhouse one is a brilliant one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that volume of water, even if you've got an unheated greenhouse, it keeps the frost off the greenhouse.
It's
And
brilliant.
it's just so, it's appliance of science all the time. It's really good. But one of my other bugbears, I'm afraid, a little bit, is growing plants in pots and containers. How many times do you get, what can I plant in a south-facing garden against the wall in a pot that will climb up the wall and flower all year round? How often do you ask that?
I know. I mean, I suppose, to be fair, lots of people haven't got that space, have they? But I know where you're going to go next. You want us to put the plants in the ground, don't you?
I like to. I mean, I know we both plant containers as well, don't we? But they tend to be big pots, don't they?
Yeah, as big as we can deal with. And I think, and I say you're right. I mean, a plant is always going to be its happiest in the ground. Goes without saying, doesn't it? It gets to get its roots in. I suppose one thing that I've done a lot more of, and you and I have chatted about this as well, is that the long-term stuff that I'm putting in containers, I have gone back to putting a lot more soil in those mixes.
Yeah.
So trying to create as close as normal habitat as I can. I've experimented with the veggies this year in the containers. And to be honest, mate, I've put them in the soil and put a lot more soil in, with my sort of, my peat free and, and whatever I'm mixing it with. They've done really well. But I'm also willing to move them. Yeah. So if there's been hot days, they've gone into the cool, and I think sometimes we worry about putting stuff that loves the sun too much in shade because it won't get the light. But actually, in reality, this time of year, the sun's so high, you get decent light anyway, don't you?
You're dead right, because that's something that I often say to people. You tend to do most of your garden planning in the winter and early spring, and you forget that by the summer, actually, the sun is really high in the sky. It rises in the northeast and sets in the northwest. So even a north-facing aspect gets loads of light, doesn't it?
Yeah, really? Exactly. So I mean, in an ideal world, we get those plants in the ground because, again, you get them through. They just become happier, and I think as well, even when you're, it's interesting with the watering thing, isn't it? And the fact that we're very quick to turn to the hose pipe, and actually in reality, you can slowly harden plants off. At times you've just got to be brave. Yeah, and it feels unnatural. It's a bit like your kids need to have adventures, but you're nervous. Yeah, but you want to wrap them in cotton wool and protect them. And I suppose the plants in the same way is that if you can back off and be brave, a lot of plants will harden themselves off. And that's another little tip, isn't it? Really.
Well, it's. I think you're right with watering and also feeding. I mean, we've got this sort of anthropomorphic mentality about plants, haven't we? That we've got to treat them like human beings, like we would animals as well. Yeah. That they've got to have a good meal, they've got to have a decent. And yet, I tend to grow my plants drier, and I tend to not overdo the feeding. I tend to feed my plants with high potash, which toughens them up as well as encouraging flower. And you get such better results. And then you're not constantly saying, oh, I've got a problem with something coming and sucking the sap out of it because it's too soft and sappy,
Exactly.
It's a really weird thing. So anyway, I think I've rambled on a little bit too long about it. I'm on my hobby horse now. I should shut up. But there's lots more ideas in that June issue that, hopefully ring true with people, and that there's little bits that people can learn.
It's little bits. If we all do little bits. Yeah.
And you're like me very often. You'll say one thing and there's a light bulb goes on in somebody's head, isn't there? Isn't it a lovely thing to see that light bulb?
I think that's what is quite nice when you and I, when we're teaching and that together, because it ends up being conversational. And if you're teaching by yourself or you're talking by yourself, you can tend to, you know what you're going to talk about, and all right, someone might draw you here. But it's the moment you have a conversation with another gardener, which is one of the things I'm missing like hell at the moment, it evolves the whole subject.
Yeah. But that's how gardening used to be, didn't it? It used to be old boys chatting together and having a mardle or catching up, or old girls talking over the wall, over the garden wall, you know. And that's how information was passed on. And I think that's how we're a couple of old men, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I knew you were going there as well. So, but yeah, I think you're right. You know, I'd tell you stories about your nan and your granddad, you know, the old boys on the parks department that used to go, Frosty boy, no, come on, we need to be doing it like this. And I'm still gardening, that tutorage under Jeff. All those things have stuck with me, you know, and I think I suppose that's part of what you and I have got to do, is keep passing that on.
Well, I also think that's why people love what you do on screen, and also when they meet you, they're inspired because you've got a very approachable manner and you engage people and you take people on that journey. Because a lot of people, if they're trying to learn it out of books, what you're doing is bringing it to life.
You're making me feel uncomfortable now, Sam, because you're not normally that nice to me.
I'm just blowing smoke. But I just think, you know, isn't it, we've spent all our lives learning and there's still plenty more to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Why should we guard it jealously? We want to share it, don't we?
We should share it. And I think, you know, and you and I have both come from not necessarily the most straightforward backgrounds, all right? And if you really think about it, where we are, what we do, that's all because of a garden, mate. That's all because of a garden, and you know, and that gives me goosebumps just thinking back to
I went goosebumpy then. I went exactly
because you know we know each other's history, and we know as 16-year-olds we was lost.
Yeah,
you know, and I know that's a bit for people, but we've had all that out of the garden, you know, and you could say that power, that's mind blowing.
Well, it changes people's lives. That's the great thing about it. And you realise that when you're on that journey, that that's your life. It's always going to be something new to learn, something to pass on. So I would say, on behalf of the British public, keep on doing what you're doing, Adam. Because
keep on keeping on, boy. Keep on keeping on. That's what we say. Keep on keeping on.
Yeah, we love seeing you there. So what's the plan for the rest of the year then? What's going on in the garden now?
I tell you what I've decided to do, which will blow you. So you know, at the end of the gravel garden, circle a bit. Up above that, as you go up into that that little second meadow area, I'm going to extend the gravel garden over winter.
I think that's a really good idea.
The gravel garden is so happy,
hasn't it?
Huh?
That's been so successful, that gravel garden.
Honestly, and giving it, what I've done is I've set it up and just give it freedom.
Yeah.
And it's loved the freedom. It's like it's been let out. And I suppose why it's driven me to that is some of the things in the gravel garden are already trying to seed out of the gravel garden.
Yeah.
So I'm going, well, why am I fighting this? I might as well. And what's interesting is I'm going to put a brick circle, so repeat the circular shape of the end of the gravel garden, put a brick circle up there. That'll be where we sort of family. And again, it's somewhere where we've been drawn to over the summer, because I've never spent this much time in the garden with the family. So that's going on. I've got my hands on some timber to make a nice little arbour over the sort of the bottom end, so the west end of the garden, where all that flooding was. So that might go on the back end of the summer. But partly at the moment, I'm out there with a cup of tea. And, you know, weeding, thinning. You know what I'm like. I tend to garden with a bit of freedom. And I think it's the first year where I've given the garden, I've put in enough things that self-seed and do the business for it to the first year to go, this is what we're going to look like if you give us that freedom. And for me, that's where I want to be as a gardener. I think even as a designer, there's a line, I think, between what Mother Nature does and what we do as human beings. And I suppose I feel like I want to be as close to that line as possible. I think some people would walk into my garden at the moment, mate, and think, oh my, he's just let it go. He's let it go. You know, you're really having to engage with the plants to get down some of the pathways. But I'm loving it, really loving it.
I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? I think rather than imposing too much design, so you start off with the bones,
Yeah.
and you're imposing design to start with, but then you just ease back with the planting, don't you, and the plants, and you let them start to do their own thing, and you edit. You're doing a little bit of editing, aren't you?
Exactly what we're doing, and very much with wildlife in mind.
Yeah.
You know, so it's lovely in the meadow area where the yellow rattle was going all right last year. That's gone great guns. I took some of that seed, moved it further up the meadow. It's all most of it's taken. So it's lovely. I mean, it's a little bit unbalanced at the moment. The oxide daisies are being slightly thuggish, but they'll have their moment, and that'll balance out, and the other things will start to come. So what about you?
Well, I've just developed another new part of my garden, actually, because it's not very big. So I have to oik everything out and start again in little pockets. Mm-hmm. So I've just taken out my chicken run, which I love chickens, but I think it was taking up too much garden space. So they've gone to a friend who's looking after them. I've made a new little herbaceous area. It's only about 15 foot square, but it's all with really tall perennials and really tall grasses. So hopefully once it's established, you'll walk into it and you'll feel like you're in the savannah, in the grassland. So there we are. That's my little project at the moment. But,
fantastic. Yeah. And it's been lovely, hasn't it, online, seeing the pictures of people's projects and what people have been doing at home. Well,
the beauty of this celebration of summer that we're doing, that there are loads of those videos from people are on the website as well, and you can go and look at them all. And it's that's what gardening's about, sharing.
Yeah, because I think, you know, I said to you earlier on, I was nervous early in lockdown. I didn't want anyone to think I was all right for him in his garden and whatever. So I was really nervous, and then slowly after those programs started getting messages of people saying thanks for sharing and thanks for this and could you do this and maybe do this, and then you realise that there were so many people just getting some solace out of a little 15-second film, you know, and you realise that was making a difference to people's days. And
well, that's exactly how I feel when I have the privilege of coming and seeing that garden, Adam, because it just whisks me away somewhere else. And by sharing it on the telly, you know, that's the other thing that
I suppose all it is really
supporting people too.
It's just a dream, isn't it? It's just, you know, that's what it really is. I'm just sort of living it, really. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed our little chat. As we say in Norfolk, our little marvel.
I've just realised we're actually talking to people, aren't we?
Yeah.
I forgot we're talking to people. This is you and me catching up.
We're having a little chat, but it's good. It's nice. I think sometimes it's quite nice for people to see that, hopefully.
Yeah. You know, well, love to everybody as well. You know, love to everybody, and everybody keep safe, keep gardening. And
yeah, that's what I feel as well. Let's make sure that everybody keeps safe, and people who need to protect themselves keep doing that, and let's beat this virus, but beat it with gardening.
Yeah, exactly. Let's garden our way out of it, mate. Garden our way out. Yeah. All right, boy.
Well, thanks, Adam. Really nice to see you, and I'll speak again soon. And one day I'll get back to the garden, and we'll be able to share our love and passion of plants. So see you soon, mate. Take care.
Look after yourself. Loads of love, fella. Cheers.
Bye. So there you are, a great opportunity for me to catch up with my old friend Adam. Haven't seen him for months, so it was great for me. I hope you've enjoyed it too. Don't forget to put the dates in your diary for next year's Gardeners World Live, which will make a return to the NEC at Birmingham. The dates are the 17th until the 20th of June 2021. I look forward to seeing you there.